All right. Good evening, everyone. I hope you're having a very good evening. We're back at it again with another weekly podcast, a bit delayed this time, but we've got Daniel, Arad, and Marad. And before we get into Aston Villa and all that talk, I was hoping Emil would be here as well to get a viewpoint on Arsenal and what they thought about the performance at Stamford Bridge. So I guess I'll hand it to you, Daniel. What did you think of the performance?
I would say I enjoyed it. I had to wake up at 4 a.m. to watch the game, which was a bit of a pain, but I'm used to it already. There's a lot of talking parts around it, but I think it was an amazing game. 90 minutes were brilliant. It reminded me of how United played against Chelsea for the first half, but that was a complete 90-minute dominance from Arsenal. I think from top to bottom, the team performed really well. Obviously, Chelsea didn't do themselves any favors with how they performed, and their defense, their attack were absolutely non-existent. But I have to say the team is coming up really well. The attack is functioning, even though Jesus hasn't scored for 8 games. Nonetheless, he's doing things for the team that nobody else has been doing, and it was clearly seen with Aubameyang for Chelsea. Aubameyang had like 8 touches. Jesus had more than the entire of Arsenal midfield. So I think that tells you all you have to know.
Was there any, like, as an Arsenal fan, did you find any bad blood about how the game was advertised? I don't know about the States, but at least in the UK, I saw a lot of BT Sports and especially Aubameyang referring to nothing personal. And then what was it, Gabriel on Twitter then posting the same thing?
Look, I get that there are different commercial obligations as players have in order to satisfy, for broadcasters or whatever, advertisers. Again, I said it before and I say now, I have no bad blood with Aubameyang. I think he's done great for us. I think he wasn't the right choice for the captain. I think the way it ended was really sour, but it had to end because his behavior and his just lifestyle was very bad for the team and very bad for the youngsters. It ended the way it ended. I wasn't mad. It wasn't like a Van Persie to United or Fabregas to Chelsea type of transfer, which was like, oh my God, incredible player at the top of their peak of their careers going to a rival. He's a player that's clearly on a decline, a player that clearly needs a team to supply him balls in order for him to score. So whatever, let him get his check at Chelsea. I don't think he cares either. I saw him liking a post from, I think, Troops on Instagram as well, with nothing personal. So you can clearly see that the guy doesn't really care. I get it, it's a commercial obligation. I mean, there is a point where perhaps your agent or whatever, your manager who manages your commercial stuff, come in and be like, maybe this is a bit too much, not this, but I don't know. He had to say it. It wasn't like he ran into the studio, kick the door, and be like, this is what I'm saying on camera. Let me say it. So I don't know. I'm not really vexed about it. Had he scored, perhaps maybe it could have had a different conversation, but I guess it is what it is, huh?
Yeah. And Arad, I guess from more of a neutral's point of view, how big of a win do you think this is for Arsenal? Not just in the London derby situation, but more in the whole title situation.
Big win, big 3 points. I don't think Chelsea are a big contender, to be honest. I think it was only ever a big game because it's a London derby. To be honest, I would even go as far as to say this game had similarities of what Liverpool-Everton would probably look like this season. I think there's that big of a gulf between these two teams at the moment. I've said this a few times. I think Potter was a mistake for Chelsea. Tuchel sacking him was a mistake. I don't think Potter is a mistake, but I think sacking Tuchel after backing him with 250 million in the summer is a mistake. I think Potter is a good manager, but maybe he's been thrown in too deep, too soon, with not having enough time to implement his ideas in the preseason. So I think the gulf between the two teams was evident. Daniel said it was complete domination. Arsenal got what they deserved. I think they were Arsenal were unlucky not to get more than 1 goal, because I think it flatters Chelsea with a 1-0. A neutral could have said it was a tight game, but it really wasn't. And you look at that game, and I don't think at any point you felt like Chelsea were about to score. And the XG I think they had was like 0.07, and against United they had 0.09 or something like that. Like, it's clear there's a dysfunctioning midfield and attack there, and Potter's got big problems coming up, I think.
And Merritt, I want to ask you, you were not shaking your head a bit there. Do you think the switch Tuchel and Potter was a good one, bad one, or what do you feel about the situation?
I think it's deeper than just changing managers. Since Abramovich left, as we've discussed previously, the philosophy of that club has shifted. They're so used to winning impromptu and just having a manager come in like a Mourinho, like a Conte who came in. Now we've got the Tuchels, and all of these managers have been sacked the minute they're not delivering on a trophy. And it's bigger than that, because with the new ownership there, I think they've got a long-term vision, whereas the squad right now has been aging and it's just not good enough. As Arad mentioned, their midfield is a big struggle, but I think their forwards, we said this when we met up the other day, Kai Havertz, his whole career has lived off that Champions League goal and that final. And other than that, has he actually done anything in a Chelsea shirt which has proven his worth? I don't think he has. So, yeah, I don't think sacking Tuchel was helpful, but I do think Potter is a brilliant manager. Don't get me wrong. I think he's going to be there to stay for a long time if they back him in the transfer windows. But they've got massive problems, and it's just a wounded squad. It's the mindset's not there to win. It's shocking because before the season started, we all were sort of expecting a solid top three of Liverpool, Chelsea, and Man City. And fourth place was up for grabs. But the last 13, 14 games have clearly shown us that the tables have turned, and Arsenal's taking that third best team in England at the moment.
I think if I can jump... Sorry,
yeah, go ahead.
I think if I quickly jump in about Chelsea, I think Meredith is spot on about Chelsea and about their way of progress. This new structure, the ownership has changed, and I'm guessing the strategy has changed, but their fans haven't. They've been used to this quick success route, and I'm already seeing a lot of comments on Twitter and social media overall of calling for Potter's head and calling for him to be sacked. And it's been like 2 months. It's incredible, but they've been conditioned on winning right now and right away. I think their squad is also built for that. It's not like a squad that's built for a strategy and all that. It's a squad that's built for winning. If you look at the Chelsea team of past, it was a team of players. If a player doesn't like a manager, the whole squad turns on the manager, and then the manager has to get sacked. It happened with Mourinho, with Grant, whatever manager you bring up, it happened at Chelsea. So whether they have the patience, whether the fans have the patience, whether the players buy into the philosophy, it will all depend on that. But again, looking at the league right now, it's not like a Premier League of years gone, where you can sign players and win. It's a league with City that dominates the league non-stop, and you can't have players dictating what you can and cannot win. You need a project in order to beat City. What Liverpool did, and I don't know, perhaps what's Arsenal trying to imitate, but you can't just sign world-class players and win. It might work with the Champions League once in a while, but it will never work with the Premier League, especially with the way City are.
Daniel, one thing you've said there. Sorry, Paul, but you said I don't think it's about Potter. I really don't think the conversation should ever be about Potter here and the fans calling for Potter's head. These fans were never calling for Tuchel's head. The fans were behind Tuchel for the most part, and Tuchel was delivering success. I think the mistake was sacking him. I don't think Potter's a bad manager, but surely we have to go only as far back as sacking Tuchel to see the downfall, and not necessarily to say that Potter's the wrong choice, because I don't think he is. But if you had right now your Arsenal team, would you rather have Potter or Tuchel in charge?
Again, I can't really answer that. They're such different managers, such different philosophies. It's like heaven and earth, It's.
I'd have Tuchel, mate. He's a winner. He's a winner, and that's it. He's won trophies, and Potter hasn't. And I think, unfortunately,
You're wrong, mate. Look at their squad. Like, I think there was a picture I saw on Twitter almost a year ago today. Jorginho won Player of Europe. Mendy won Best Goalkeeper. Thiago Silva was in the team of the best defenders. and they had Kante as well. So like all of their team had got someone of best European, and of course Tuchel, best manager. So how can you go from one extreme to the other and say Tuchel's not good enough? Like something's clearly happened. No, I mean in general, like with Daniel as well.
Who said that?
No, I know you agree that Tuchel is good, but when you go from one extreme of them being dominant, best side in Europe, and the players are there and the proof's in the pudding, how do you go from that to sacking Tuchel in the space of 8 months? I think the silence says enough.
I think, yeah.
No one knows.
Let's give the floor back to Paul.
Yeah.
So that's one side of the coin for the title race. Now we can also talk about the other side, which is Man City. I didn't watch the game, but from what I understood, is they scraped a 2-1 win with a Haaland last-minute penalty winner after Cancelo getting a red card. And Haaland didn't play for most of the game. Now, how much do you think that's effect of Man City playing with 10 players versus 11? Or do you think that Man City really do have a problem without Haaland? So I'll ask Mara this question first, but I also do want to hear from everyone.
Yes, I watched, I'd say the majority of the game, but with City going down to 10 men, they still dominated the game and they were still on the front foot. Fulham never really looked to win the game. And then obviously when Erling Haaland came on, he scored a goal which was ruled out for VAR, and then obviously 95th minute penalty. So a 10-man City can beat a Fulham side, which to be honest is not a weak side at all. And they were down to 10 men from the first half. So I think it just clearly shows the domination they've got over this league, and it's becoming ridiculous to the point where they can actually win a game. I'd say comfortably. They looked like they were winning that game with 10 men. And the fact they just got a goal in the 95th minute adds to the spice, but they could have scored in the 60th minute for all we care, that they were that dominant. So, yeah, I think you're right. City's domination of the league is beyond anything we've seen in the past, and I think beyond anything we're ever going to see in this Premier League.
Arad?
I don't think it's a problem Haaland not playing. I think Alvarez scored their first goal, so clearly they've got a forward player who knows how to find the back of the net. It wasn't so much scraping a win. Of course, scoring in the 95th minute does seem that way. But again, I think very similar to the Arsenal game. If you look at the scoreline, it doesn't say the full story. Watching a game often tells you a very clear idea of who is dominating and who isn't. And yeah, City dominated, but I suppose you would expect them to dominate Fulham, even with 10 men. What was interesting is that I think the red card for Cancelo, it is a penalty and it probably is a red card, but then is that consistency followed up in the Liverpool game, which maybe we talk about?
Soft.
It isn't. It's a soft penalty, but the consistencies aren't there. And we say this every week, I think. So I don't think it was a red, to be honest. Okay, it's a penalty, sure. But that game was almost, I think the Premier League were trying to make it a difficult one for City, if you know what I mean. But really, they didn't have to be that way. City could have won by 8 goals and no one would have blinked an eye.
Yeah, and Daniel?
I think, saying that, saying that Fulham, had a chance would be really flattering to Fulham. If you're someone who came to watch the game after the red card and you didn't know there was a red card, you probably think that Fulham were playing with 10 men instead of City. I was watching the game and it was that dominant. It was like Fulham had 10 men and they sat back and just defended for the entire remaining of the first, second half. And there's this famous video online of Snoop Dogg. He's giving an interview and just says, that motherfucker don't miss. In the heat of battle, he don't miss. That's literally they don't miss,
He's good.
Yeah, that's it. I was looking at the City side, and I can't imagine now. Can kind of imagine what Liverpool fans were going through. The last 3 years. You're kind of competing with this team that never loses, never drops points. Even when you think they're playing with 10 men and there's a chance, they still find a way, like in 95th minute, to come back into it. And again, people love talking about money being spent and them being backed by, rich owners, but we saw it, with United, money doesn't solve everything. You can spend shy of €500 million and still being in the same predicament. The thing with City is they're so good because their recruitment is top notch. I'm almost certain that they already know what they're gonna go for when Pep leaves. I'm already pretty sure that they have a manager lined up after Pep is gone, who they're gonna go on and hire to
Arteta.
I don't think it's Arteta, but I think there's a manager out there who they are looking for and recruiting for him. That's how good they are. That's why when we're talking about Chelsea, I said you need to have a project, you need to have an incredible foundation built in order to even challenge City seriously, not just a couple months of a year.
All right, I do want to ask this last question. What do you think could stop City? Is there anything this season or further down the line that could stop this, as we say, almost like inevitable victory team?
This season, Arsenal will get closest to stopping them. I don't think they'll stop them. I think what could stop them is if Arsenal have a flawless, injury-less season. In terms of injuries, I mean flawless in that sense. They don't lose important players. I really think Arsenal can push City, come April. And if Arsenal are still in a race, within 3 or 4 points come April, then I would imagine that that's not a City dominant season. I think going further down the line, teams will get better. Newcastle are probably the next in line to challenge City. I think genuinely they're the third best team in the country right now. And I would go as far as to say the gap between third and fourth is bigger than the gap between first, second, and third. I think those top three are performing at such a level that consistently they go in expecting to win. And Newcastle probably can stop City going down the line, and Arsenal this season. But when we talk about stopping City, what does that even mean? I mean, taking them to the last 10 games is probably counting as stopping them. Not winning it in the first half of the season probably counts as stopping them.
Mara, do you think there's any weak points in that City team, or any players that if, let's say, after the World Cup, they came back and they had an injury in that position, you'd say, oh, they're going to struggle now?
Unfortunately not. The only position you would think or the only player you would certainly pinpoint would be Erling Haaland, who isn't even going to the World Cup. Now, that could be a bad thing for them. He might not be match fit. He might, go to Ibiza during the World Cup, and he's a young lad. He might still have that side of him, which Pep hasn't realized yet. But given how professional he is, the likelihood is he's going to be in the training ground, scoring goals in the back of the net against their second choice keeper.
Does Harry Maguire and gets locked up in Greece for a couple of weeks?
Maguire.
Sorry, Mary. I catch up.
That would be the only thing to stop them. But no, even if they lose a player like De Bruyne, right? They've got a bench of Gundogan who can play there. Silva can drop back. They can even start Alvarez and put Foden in midfield. Like, they've got so many options even off their bench. And we've said this before, but they've literally got 2 starting 11s to win this league. And you talk about depth, you can't. They've got like a Atlantic Ocean, and everyone else has a swimming pool. Like you physically cannot compete with that team. So I don't think anything stops them, and they're going to win the league by 10 to 15 points. I feel very clear.
Well, after talking about sorry, Daniel, did you want to say something?
Yeah, I just want to quickly to finish it off with the challenge. It probably will depend on again. We keep talking about this all the time, but it's probably important to note. It's like 2 small seasons we're having. What's happening before the World Cup and what's happening after. I'm not sure as to what condition the Arsenal players will come back or the City players will come back after the World Cup. Some of them might be on form, others off form, injured, and January transfer window will be important. We know that probably Arsenal, United, and City or those teams won't spend a lot during January. I don't think they will. But, Arsenal need depth in the defensive midfield position and winger, potentially. If we sign those 2 players, a DM and a winger, perhaps we can push them to the end. If we don't, then it's a different story. But we'll have to see what happens. I think if Arsenal go into the break first, then it's a very good sign, and we'll have to come back in December and see what's going on.
Right. Now that we've talked about the title challenge, let's move on to the top four. So as I mentioned in the beginning, with our lovely friend Unai Emery, with his good evening, he did a very good evening to United on his first game back in the Premier League, beating Man United 3-1. And Arad, what did you see from the game, from your point of view?
Ooh, trying to forget about that one. I didn't know we were going to discuss that on the podcast because I was trying to imagine the game never happened. Honestly, I think Emery is our bogeyman. I'm convinced at this point that we simply cannot beat the team that is managed by Emery, or at the very least, he makes it hard for us. He's a good manager, to be fair. You know, his team played good defensively, and Merad said something that made him look really dumb before the game. He said that this Villa team are going to get the bounce of a bowling ball on the new manager. You know, those were his words, and it bit him in the ass because it seems like Villa got a new manager and they're new team. No, but they seem like a different team than what we've seen in the last few weeks. Look, United have been playing a lot of games, so we have to put that into account. Villa had a week off, and United had 2 games in the meantime. You know, so our players are bound to have fatigue, and that does build up over the course of the season. We don't have the depth to replace players. We have too many injuries in the front line. Sorry to say, Ronaldo is the GOAT, but he is finished. He can no longer be our striker at the top level. Don't shake your head, Merad. I'm going to come down and slap the shit out of you because you've been backing this guy for weeks. And the guys scored 3 goals. Look, I love Ronaldo. Look, he scored 3 goals. One was a penalty against Sheriff. Another was a tap-in against Sheriff. Yes? And he scored 1 against Everton, which, to be fair, good goal. But that's not going to happen week in, week out. We're seeing it now. So, yeah, that was my thoughts on the game. Just, I was trying to forget about it. We're tired. It never happened. But my point still stands. I don't think we can win too many games this season if Ronaldo plays striker. And it sucks to say because I'm one of his biggest fans. You all know that because you've known me years. But, you know, call a spade and let's move on, you know. Make it civil and not play him when he doesn't need to play.
Merad, I'll ask you, not just Ronaldo, but Fernandes missed the game through suspension. How big of an impact do you think both those Portuguese players have on the team?
To be fair with Fernandes, I think the reason it showed that we missed him isn't because he's been world class when he's played this season, but more so Donny van de Beek was just so bad that we just saw the discrepancy between him and Fernandes. But look, on Ronaldo, you can say he's finished. You can say he's not the player he used to be. I can agree to a certain extent, but this guy is still world class. He can still finish a football like no other player can. He's got that instinctive striker, you know, poacher's instinct that not even Erling Haaland has, in my opinion. But when you've got wingers...
No, continue.
No, look, guys, when you've got wingers like Rashford and Garnacho playing next to you, or even the likes of Alanga, where these guys are inside forwards, they're not wingers. Traditional wingers, when you look at Erling Haaland, he plays technically with a De Bruyne and a Foden, right? On his left and his right. And these players whip the ball in crisper than anything you can know. And he taps in every single goal. Like from his 18 goals this season, I think 15 have been tap-ins, right? Like if you put Ronaldo in that position as well, he'll bag you the same amount of goals. So the fact doesn't get delivery means he doesn't get opportunity to score, and it looks bad on him. But don't sit there for a second hour and think that Ronaldo is a finished player and he can no longer play in the Premier League, because he can walk into any top 6 side, in my opinion, as a number 9, strictly speaking, as a number 9, and perform and bag 20 goals a season minimum. But if you disagree, that's your opinion. That's perfectly
Can
fine.
I jump in there? Can I jump in there, Paul, before we move to Daniel on this?
Go ahead.
Two
You
things.
already jumped in, so go ahead.
First of all, I disagreed with you, but at least I respected you. Now I don't even respect you because you literally admitted that he's finished and then went on to tell us that he can walk into any team. So at least I didn't agree with you. But
When did I say he's finished? I said I agree to a certain extent because of the factors. You moron.
It's a good thing. It's a good thing we're on video because you can go back and watch it again. Anyway, the second thing I'm going to say is that, and I actually thought about this today, right? Let's look at Messi and Ronaldo, right? The two GOATs of our generation. Messi last season had a bad season. But because of the league he plays in and the team he has around him, what does Messi get as a reward this year? Playing in the Champions League, right? With a probably even better team than he had last year in the same easy league. And Messi's having a great season. Ronaldo, on the other hand, had a great season last season, individually speaking, in a team that is absolutely dog shit, worst United side ever. And what does he get? He plays in the Europa League. And I genuinely think that has got through Ronaldo's head. We know how much about individual awards he is, and he's seeing Messi perform in the Champions League. And Messi had a really bad season, and he's being rewarded with that. Ronaldo has a great season, and his reward is to play against FC Sheriff and FC Omonia. Like, I genuinely think at some point when you're that good of a player and one of the goals of the game, you start to think it's just not worth the effort. And I think that's what it's come to. He doesn't care about trying to make this team better. At this point, it's about how can he salvage his legacy and no longer about the team. And I think Paul said this in the very first podcast. If everyone's not rowing in the same direction, we can't have him on board. And I genuinely think he's not on the same wavelength or on the same page as the rest of the team. And Paul was spot on in week one when he said it. And even at that point, I
cannot believe you're doubting Ronaldo's professionalism. Of all things you can doubt, you're doubting his professionalism as a football player. That is disgusting.
I have to doubt it, especially after what he did at Tottenham. I'm sorry. As much as, yes, he's the GOAT. He is the reason I support United today. But what he did against Tottenham is disrespectful to the highest degree. And I'm sorry, I've been holding it in for too long. But I cannot stand here listening to Ronaldo fans absolutely love him to death after what he's done. Any other player in any other club does that. He's getting sold in January.
Can I ask you a question, Paul? Can I ask you a question, though, on that? Hold on.
Yes.
I agree it wasn't right. And I'm not defending his actions, but
you are
in the same instance, I'm turning this on to Ten Hag. Although I love him as a manager,
my God!
Ronaldo. Listen,
let him speak. Let him speak. Let the man speak.
Up and listen, mate. Listen. He didn't sub Ronaldo on against Man City, and his excuse was out of respect and not bringing him on because the game was done and dusted. Why?
Yes, that was against City.
Very respectful, and I completely agree.
So why would he bring on out of respect? Out of respect, he didn't bring him on. Out of respect, why are you trying to sub on someone who's a legend of the game? You brought on Elanga before him. I think he brought on Fred before him as well. You want to sub Ronaldo on in the 88th minute of the game? For what?
The fact that you're even asking this question shows how...
Don't bring him on at all.
No, mate, the fact that you're asking this
we
question
said it
shows
before,
how little you understand about football.
Is naive to the Premier League. He's also naive to coaching superstars, and you know it.
Forget about it. This guy doesn't want to speak. Listen, 5-0 down, 4-0 down against City is a completely different case in bringing around Ronaldo on to be... Once you're on that pitch, you accept somewhat responsibility of the loss. A player on the bench cannot be responsible for the loss of the team. The team got battered, yeah? Why are you going to bring Ronaldo on in a game that is lost, being battered, rather than bringing him on a 2-1 win or 2-0 win against Spurs? Do you not see the difference between that? The one is respectful and another is understanding that, listen, we didn't want to start you on this game, but go on and have a few minutes because I might need you on Thursday against Sheriff. Do you not get
in the 89th minute? In the 89th minute. That's when you sub on academy.
I'm sorry. You know what, guys? £500,000 a week is not enough for a player to go on and do his job when he's called upon. Let's give Ronaldo double the salary and sack Ten Hag for wanting to make managerial decisions.
All I'm saying is if it's a matter of respect.
This is what you want.
If you're saying it's a matter of respect, look at both sides of the coin.
Went from United Villa to Ronaldo discussion. This is peak entertainment.
That's why he's a GOAT.
But I would say this, for a player's job is not to question, why did this player come on before me? A player's job is to be like a soldier and listen to what his commander is told. You won't have a soldier, especially now in Ukraine, you won't have a soldier out there asking questions. Wait, why am I having to do X, Y, and Z? No, he will shut up, get on with the job and do the job. Whether Ronaldo doesn't play a single minute, whether he plays 90 minutes, his job is not to question why he's doing what he's been told to do. He's supposed to do the job to the best of his ability. That is what it means to be professionals. I don't accept. Yeah, sure, we can question why did Elanga go. That's a question for Ten Hag. That's not a question for Ronaldo to question or to answer. His job, whenever he's called upon, to do the job. But anyway, enough of that.
Okay,
Paul, let's not forget, right? Casemiro, 5-time Champions League winner, sat on the bench for Scott McTominay. Do you see Casemiro bitching and moaning? No, Casemiro sat on the bench. When he came on, actually delivered. You see, there are differences. Ronaldo hasn't come on and delivered and been disrespected. Ronaldo's come on, not delivered goals, not done what he's supposed to do, not done what we know he can do, and then complained about not starting games. Casemiro is a prime example of exactly what Paul just said. A soldier. He sat on the bench for game after game after game, watching McTominay, who doesn't know his left from his right, passing the ball in the midfield, running a midfield. A world-class midfielder who's won 5 Champions Leagues, one without Ronaldo, by the way. Yeah? Sat on the bench for McTominay. That's a soldier. Someone who comes on and then makes that position his. Ronaldo never came on and made that number 9 his. He scored 3 goals, a penalty against Sheriff, a tap-in against Sheriff, and an Everton goal that was good, but okay, hasn't been consistent. Paul, you can take it, move on.
I wanted to speak to Daniel, ask him what does he see. From my point of view, Arsenal are a bit above the top 4 challenge, but where do you see the challenge at top 4 going? Who would you say are your favorites in the top 4 challenge?
It's really tough to decide because, I mean, before the game, I saw the United lineup and instantly I thought, okay, this probably will be a loss for United, or at least not a win. It was very imbalanced. Again, I have to say, I'm not going back to the Ronaldo discussion, but I saw Ronaldo starting and I was like, yep, that's it. This is bad news for United. But you should expect those type of games from United. I said it on the last podcast and I'll repeat it again. Ten Hag is a brilliant manager and he needs time to implement his ideas. He's probably the best manager United had since Fergie, arguably. You can make this argument. But it's a slow process. I mean, not to brag or something, but I think United might be looking at Liverpool model, perhaps maybe an Arsenal model right now and thinking, you know what, this is what we should follow in order to get us back to where we are, because we spend so much money on big players, hasn't worked. We spend money on bringing English players, hasn't worked. Let's try and, spend this amount to improve the squad slowly in order to, challenge the teams in the future. I would probably have to say Aston Villa game was, I don't know, more of an anomaly, even though you guys mentioned that, you played bad against West Ham, the game I haven't watched. And so this is probably came back to bite you. But again, this game is manager bounce. Every Villa player wants to show to the new manager that they deserve the spot. And so they're playing basically like it's their last game. So there's that. But I think the important part for United is to be consistent, win those games against small teams, challenger teams, and show they deserve the top 4. I think top 4 is secured for mostly City and Arsenal, I would have to say. Again, the more it goes by, I would say Newcastle are even staking the claim even more, looking at how they play. They absolutely annihilated Southampton, which isn't hard to do, but nowadays. But Arsenal haven't
says
done
you.
it. Yeah,
says you.
I mentioned it.
Them, bro.
And they're looking very, very sold on. The last spot, I don't know. Chelsea, honestly, I'm not sure what's going on with them. I think they're one of the teams that will probably spend heavy in January to try and kind of save their season. I think United will make it, but again, it all depends on what's going to happen in January. Again, I think Ronaldo should be gone for the sake of the squad, for the sake of the team. If he's solid, then it's great. And United need a striker in January. If they sign a striker, then they have a very good chance of finishing in the top 4. If they don't, then I feel it will be a struggle.
Yeah, moving on to the next, I guess, Super Sunday game, top 4 game was Spurs-Liverpool, where Liverpool got a 2-0. I watched some of this game. I watched Liverpool go 2-0 up after Eric Dyer's horrible mistake, and I thought that was game, set, and match. Spurs got 1 goal back through Harry Kane, which helped my fantasy team quite a bit. I'm so thankful for that. But Marad, what do you think about those 2 teams and their bid for the Champions League spots?
I've said this before. I think Spurs play terrorist football, and Conte's teams in the past haven't been that bad. Like, you look at his Inter Milan winning side, and they could dominate possession, 50, 55, 60% possession per game. So I don't know exactly what's going wrong and why he's refusing to not play 5 at the back with Emerson Royale, which is basically 4 at the back plus a liability, right? But looking at that game and which team looks likely for top 4, I think given how shitty Liverpool have been recently, you see that performance and you still think they've got it there to compete. And on their day, they still look like they can actually challenge City as well. But if you look at the Premier League table, it says a different story. So it's a bit of a weird one where Spurs look favourites, but Liverpool played better. So I'd say Liverpool is going to make their way back up the table slowly but surely. And especially when we get back to, crunch time after the World Cup, where we have 2 games a week, teams like Liverpool and City, in my opinion, will be rampaging through. So I don't think they're going to catch up to City, but I think Liverpool will still finish second, maybe third in the league.
Yeah, Daniel, I want to give you the question. I guess it's $1 million question now. But why is Liverpool able to do these good performances, beat Spurs away, beat City at home, but then go on 2 losses against Nottingham Forest and Leeds?
I'd have to say it's an inconsistency issue, but even though you said good win against Spurs, they had a good first half and an abysmal second. They should have dropped points. Apart, if not for Alisson and luck, they would have drawn or at least lost the game. I'd have to say it's their squad is aging. They haven't signed any suitable replacements. It's the fatigue, and it's I guess that's it. I can't think of anything else. There's a lot of reasons why they're not performing, but they're not the Liverpool of old. Even I remember watching when they played Arsenal. You remember Liverpool of old, if they're losing last 10 minutes of the game, is absolute hell for teams. They press, and they score, or at least they make it very hard for you. The last 10 minutes of Arsenal with Liverpool, I watched it like it was nothing. Liverpool were nowhere to be found. They weren't even attacking that well. That's not what we expect of Liverpool to do. So, again, it's $1 million question, as you said. There's so many things that might have gone wrong with Liverpool. And it's not just one thing. And I'm not sure what's going to happen with them in January. Will they sign players? Will the sale go through? Will the sale not go through? What's going to happen with Klopp? So I don't know. How many points are they off top 4 right now?
I'm not sure.
I think they still have a chance of fighting for it, but I wouldn't be surprised if they finished outside of it as well, because you can't just put it all on Mane being sold and being this bad, because they look like a shadow of themselves. And it's a very hard question to answer what's wrong with Liverpool, because there's so many things that could be wrong with them.
All right, as a United fan, do you worry about Liverpool? We see they have those big games, but as Daniel mentioned, they've got questions about what are they going to do with their manager? Are they going to keep him? Are they going to move on? Then there's even question marks about the ownership now that apparently Liverpool are up for sale by the Fenway owners. With all these other things going on in the background, do you think the Liverpool players can concentrate on top 4 and then the Champions League tie they've got against Real Madrid coming up? Or is it all too much for them at this point in the season?
I think there's 2 parts there to that answer. The Premier League and the Champions League. So the Champions League, I don't think they're going to get past Real Madrid anyway, unless Salah starts thinking about revenge. Let's see what revenge he thinks up this time.
Chance already.
Yeah. Or let's maybe try to. Have you guys seen the last final? Trent had these sensors on his head about analyzing that. Maybe we need to try that again as well. I don't know. Maybe try some voodoo, juju, magic to beat them. I don't know. But no, they won't get past Real Madrid. Yeah. No, I think they get past Real Madrid. As far as them in the league, sort of comparing it to United, I was just thinking about this. I was thinking, is United where we deserve to be and where we should be in the table, or should we be higher? And I thought, well, we're probably right about where we should be. I look at our first 2 games of the season, Brighton and Brentford. We lost both games, but then we went on to beat Liverpool and Arsenal. Do we have any right beating Liverpool and Arsenal? Probably not. So I think those 2 wins negate the 2 losses that we had, because we probably could have lost those 2 games against Liverpool and Arsenal and beaten Brighton and Brentford and ended up with the same amount of points. So now with losing to Villa, I think as long as we go on and beat a big team like a Spurs, which we've done, Chelsea in the next round, or just beat a bigger team that comes up, then we sort of negate this loss, and we're right where we should be. Liverpool, on the other hand, are not where they should be. They're not beating the teams they should be beating, but they're also beating the teams that they could be losing to, if you know what I mean. The big games they're still winning, and the games that they should be winning comfortably, they're not. And I think that will change sooner rather than later for them. I still think they will finish in the top 4. If I had to say the 4 teams that make it at this point, I'd probably say City, Arsenal, Newcastle, and Liverpool. I think Chelsea, United, and Spurs will miss out. I think we've just got too much on. Like with Newcastle, the reason I put them in there is because they've got no European football, and sooner or later they might also give up a Carabao Cup or an FA Cup. Because they're not a club at this point that needs to be challenging on all fronts. Whereas Arsenal, City, Chelsea, Spurs, we demand trophies as a fan base. I think their fan base doesn't really have that demand yet. So I think the concentration for them will fully be on the Premier League. And Liverpool will probably still make it. I think getting knocked out of Europe will be the good thing for Liverpool. And then they'll focus just on the top 4. And they've got enough quality in there to make it. We talk about what the problems are at Liverpool, and it's easy to say that, it could be one thing or another, but really it's also about players just individually underperforming. Is Trent good enough? Yes. He's proven he's good enough. He needs to find that form again. Is Van Dijk good enough? He's one of the best in the world. He needs to find that form again. Rodri, same thing. Like every single one of them have 2 or 3 years to climb. And once they do, I think they'll hit a stride and climb up the table. I don't look too much into what the table looks like now. I think Spurs were top last year this time, and they finished 6th, 7th. So it doesn't mean what's happening now is going to stay that way.
And we've mentioned them a few times in this podcast so far, but I thought I'd give them the spotlight, which is Newcastle. So they've currently got a good run of form. Beat Southampton 4-1. Almiron scored now 7 goals in 7 games. Daniel, what do you make of Newcastle right now?
They're looking very good. Again, I think everyone mentioned something about them as well. No European football helps them. Great investment helps them. Great players. That's what they have. No European football, nothing to focus on. And they have a really good chance of sneaking to that top 4. Whether they'll do it or not, we'll have to see. But that they're one of the teams for the future who might potentially challenge for the title in a few years' time. I think that's a serious threat because they have a good manager. Perhaps they might have an upgrade on him in the future. They have ownership and an ownership group that has infinite amount of money. And it's a very healthy-looking club. Looking at other clubs that aren't doing as well, they can sneak into that top 4 and then just build on from there.
Merit, as Man United and Newcastle are both fighting for top 4, they played each other and get a goalless draw at Old Trafford. Do you think Newcastle are a team that we're genuinely worried about, or is it a team that are just currently on a good piece of form, but when the pressure's on, and just as we saw last season with Arsenal, when the pressure is really on those players and they don't have that experience, will they crumble, or do you think they'll pull through?
I think they'll pull through. I think I wouldn't necessarily say we're competing for the same position, because I genuinely see them at this point going for 3rd. But we might be in for a shock. But I think, look, their squad isn't that good, in my opinion. Their manager is unbelievable. I think Eddie Howe has done such an incredible job. Everyone speaks about Graham Potter and his job at Brighton, but
Eddie Howe going to Newcastle, even before he went, he's built up a reputation in the Premier League for taking an average-looking squad and getting results out of them. And yes, they signed, Alexander Isak, but he's been injured. It's not like you can even say their big summer signings have been clutching up for them. You can say Trippier has been there, but Trippier is not necessarily going to be the game changer for them. So the fact January gives them an open checkbook and the World Cup actually gives them pretty much a summer window, I think the recruitment's going to be incredible for them. And going into the World Cup in third place will attract big names, in my opinion, right? People say Newcastle's only in there for the money and players to go there are going there to get big salaries. But when you look at their position in the league right now, I don't think there's any player right now in the world who wouldn't want to be a part of that project. Even the Mbappes of the world, you just never know what's going to happen, right? So, yeah, United might be in trouble, but it's really good to see Newcastle being back up there. And, I'm just looking forward to someone competing with the City team. And I think, as we've all agreed, in the next few years, the only team which looks most likely is going to be Newcastle.
Yep. And I'll just
first bit since Merat spoke all night, by the way.
I was going to say, I'll leave you with this last question. What would consist of a successful season for Newcastle? Do you think silverware has to be at the end of it at some point, whether that's the Carabao Cup or FA Cup, or is it just all like everything in the league?
No, I don't think silverware has got to be part of success for Newcastle. And I think the fact that it has to be success, like I just said, for the teams that are competing with them, the Chelseas, Spurs, Uniteds, Arsenal, like all these teams need success in the form of silverware. I don't think Newcastle do. So I think that's an even bigger advantage for them. I think, honestly, if they finish in the top four and they not only have the financial package, but they have that Champions League attraction for next year, they can ball in the summer. I mean, they can genuinely, I think, go after any player in the world. Merat said Mbappe, don't write it off. I know it's not Football Manager, but genuinely, like, if they've got Champions League football and they're willing to pay the salary that Mbappe wants and make him club ambassador and basically have him be the physio, the therapist, give him full control over the club. Why not? Why can they not go after Mbappe and or even Neymar if Neymar wants to leave? Like, genuinely, no player in the world can say no if they've got that Champions League package. Well, okay, maybe living in Newcastle is a bit of a problem, but these players can probably just get private jets.
All right, yeah, I think that's that's our time for tonight. Thank you so much for listening. If you made it this far, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. I think we've got a TikTok now as well, don't we?
Somewhat,
we do.
Something like that, yeah. And let's get hashtag Merat the Clown trending on Twitter, guys.
He's gonna get his Ronaldo.
Hashtag Merat declined on Twitter.
All I'm gonna say is, if you come for the king, you better not miss.
Wow. Okay, King. King of the
All right, guys, thank you so much for
right.
listening. Hope you have a good week.
Cheers, Paul.
See you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.